Hey everyone, it's White Cross, and you have joined me for what I hope is going to be an interesting video where we talk about a discovery silver bar. Discovery is a term that we use primarily in numismatics when we talk about somebody who has discovered a different type or a different series, some kind of interesting aspect, an attribute of a coin that makes it different from other coins of that type, of that series. And they hold kind of a place in honor. It just means that you are kind of a serious numismatist if you've studied pieces long enough to note that one interesting thing that maybe nobody else had noted before. So let's dive into this and let me know what you think. If you are new to the channel, I want to thank you for being here today and spending some time with me here today. If you are one of my returning subscribers, as always, thank you guys for being with me on this journey into precious metals. It means a lot to me, and it really, really makes me want to keep on making videos. The more people that join the community, the more people that watch these videos. It's a lot of fun. I usually start each of my videos with a disclaimer. I am not a financial advisor. I'm not trying to offer any kind of financial advice. I'm simply trying to share my experience having bought and sold precious metals and rare coins for the last 30 or 40 years. And I also usually begin my videos with a concept that we work back into my videos. But guess what? No concept this time. I just want to jump right into this and see what you think about it. So part of my journey into physical precious metals has been making this channel for the people that are interested watching these videos on YouTube. And one of the things that I talked about in one of my earlier videos was 999 silver rounds. I don't have a lot of silver rounds, honestly. They're not something that has ever really interested me that much. However, I do have a few, and we've talked about on several different occasions, things like the Engelhard prospectors from the middle of the 1980s. There are Johnson Matthey equivalents, and I do have a few pieces here and there of interesting silver rounds. Again, a round is just a 999 silver 1 ounce usual vehicle in the shape of a coin, although not minted by a government or a governmental authority, and usually without any kind of face value to it. This is an example of a silver round. And in one of my earlier videos, I was talking about this silver round in particular. This is a silver round they called a Mundanero. Now, this piece came out in 1973 and was produced by a company called Wade Ventures. And there's nothing particularly exciting about this round other than the fact that it was a pretty early one. 1973 is a pretty early time to have been making silver rounds. This is just one of those other pieces of silver that was being minted to fill the void left by silver being removed from the circulating coinage of the United States in 1964. Come on, let's get that into focus. There we go. Silver being removed in 1964, 90% at least. Obviously, the 40% silver halves continued for a little while afterwards. But that's a Mundanero, a 1 ounce silver round. And this is kind of a Wild West period of silver being produced by private companies. Not many people really knew what the market was really after. Silver coins were something we were all familiar with, but what was going to be the next thing? And the next thing for some people was a silver round, a 1 ounce silver coin-like metal that usually contained 1 troy ounce of 0.999 pure silver. A 1 denaro is a good example of that. But in that video, I was mentioning, and I'll put a link down to below so you can see it. Man, I can't focus at all today. What's going on? There we go. Okay. So I mentioned that this company had also produced a 2 silver Mundanero. You can see how thick this coin is. And in my research on when I was writing the script for this video, my notes for the video, when I started shooting the video, I was doing a little bit of research on these pieces, having forgotten most of what I had learned when I acquired them from a local dealer probably 5 or 7 years ago. And I realized that not only was there a 1 and 2, something that I knew very well, but there was a 3 ounce Mundanero. And I was fortunate to have been able to pick up 4 or 5 of those from that local dealer when I bought these several years ago. Now, when I was researching them, I found information about the companies. Again, Wade Ventures, the company that produced these, we think that they were actually minted by a company called Intermint out of California. But Wade Ventures also commissioned a 3 Mondanero piece. And when I was doing research on these pieces, I realized that the website, Numista, where I found most of the information about these pieces to share with you, did not have an image of the 3 Mondanero piece. This is a huge, thick round. This is a pretty big, thick round, especially when you're comparing it to the 1 ounce round. You see how fat that is. So the 3 Mondanero is a particularly scarce piece. Who knows how many of these there are out there? Come on, there we go. If I had to guess, I would say far fewer than 50. I would say a good guess is probably 25 to 30 of these. There may be some stashed away somewhere, but I doubt that they made very many of these in the first place, and I'm fortunate that I've got 3 or 4 of these still in my stash. So I was thrilled to find out that Numista did not have an image of the 3 Mondanero, and they were kind of asking for it. So I took some pretty good images of the 3 Mondanero, and I sent them off to Numista, and lo and behold, as you'll see here, they went ahead and used my images, something that they hadn't had before. I was thrilled to be able to provide them not so much a discovery coin, they already knew about these, but it was kind of a plate coin. That's what we talk about in numismatics when your particular coin is used as the image in either a catalog or some kind of a brochure, a coin book, some kind of reference that other numismatists can use. If your coin is used, it's called a plate coin. Whether or not it's your coin or not, it's called a plate coin. And there's a little bit of cachet to having a plate coin. So I was thrilled to provide them Numista with the image of the 3 Mondanero. And that was what happened with it. I kind of tucked it away in the back of my mind and forgot about it. And then I was able to purchase the Lydian Hoard. Now, I've talked about the Lydian Hoard probably too much to some of you, maybe not quite enough to others. This was a collection of silver bars that I was able to acquire over about a month period early in 2023. The first pieces I purchased in April. Somebody brought 3 or 4 silver bars into a local dealer. They were all vintage bars. They were styles like you see here above. This is a Western States refinery. This is a Hoffman and Hoffman bar. And this is a Star refining bar. So I purchased all 3 of those when they first appear. And I thought I was very fortunate to have purchased them. And then the heir to the estate that owned these silver bars continued to bring them into that dealer. And that dealer was kind enough to arrange for me to continue to purchase them. And I did, as more and more were brought in. Now, neither of us, the dealer nor myself, had any idea that there were far more than 20 bars. There were more than 30 bars. There were more than 40 silver bars in this hoard. But I purchased all of them to try to keep them all in this one collection, which I nicknamed the Lydian Hoard after the coins of Lydia, which were some of the first coins ever produced in ancient Ionia and ancient Turkey about 600 BC. So the Lydian Hoard was something that I acquired over about a month period of time, roughly 40 bars in the hoard, a few more than 40. And they were from various manufacturers, all from this same period of time, all from this 1970s to very early 1980s kind of period, mostly Californian bars. And I had a chance to speak with the heir of the estate, and we think that these were all purchased by the individual when he was going out to the Four Corners area in California in the mid-1970s to early 1980s. So he was specifically looking for these bars. Western States Refinery, Hoffman and Hoffman Star Metal bars. In subsequent purchase, I was able to buy some International Vaults Refining. There was also this one bar from American Credit with the Balthrop manufacturing countermark there. I've shown that before. Only one of these, unfortunately, that is a very scarce bar, something that's highly collectible. And then in the later purchases, I was able to acquire a couple of these JJSR bars with that SC countermark. They are maybe not quite as scarce as some of the other bars in the collection, but they are still somewhat scarce. And then finally, in the final purchase of this collection, which we believe now has been fully acquired, we don't think there are any more out there, was this one JKL, I believe that's it, JKL Was purchased 05/26 of 23, so very end of May of 2023. That completed the entire hoard of somewhere around 40 bars, almost all in this 10-ounce class. Again, we call them 10-ounce class because when these bars were made, the manufacturing process was a little bit more primitive, and they poured these bars to be as close as they could to be about a 10-ounce weight, but then they individually weighed them, and then they individually stamped them with the weights of those respective bars. And you've got an example of an International Vaults bar here with that 9.89, 9.99 weight down there. You see there is a blank space left, and somebody had to manually stamp in that weight after they weighed every single bar, after they got done cooling, which was a pretty labor-intensive and slow process, but that was kind of what was done at the time. So the Lydian Hoard acquired in full, and fresh in my mind was the Mondenero piece being listed as a plate coin on Numista. And kind of coming from a numismatic background, as I've mentioned many, many times before, I set about studying these bars. So I carefully examined all of them. I kind of noted all of the issues that they had, some of them with rainbow toning, like you see here on this Hoffman and Hoffman piece. The sprues or pigtails that stick out of the sides of some of them. Hopefully you can see that. Again, my camera doesn't want to focus. Let's see if we can get it in there. You see this area here. Manufacturing details that were part and parcel with how they made these bars back almost 50 years ago, or even longer. And I also used the sigma to measure each one of them, and it assigned a scale of -1, -2, +1, +2, or straight flat 0 for each of these. And I've talked about that in pretty good detail in one of the earlier videos when I was talking about one of the purchases from the series, and I'll put a link down below for that as well if you're interested. The long and the short was, while I had this collection in my hands, I wanted to do as much primary research on it as I possibly could. I wanted to make all the details in a spreadsheet. I wanted to really analyze these pieces, and hopefully was able to find some information that maybe hadn't been known before to people who collect these types of silver bars. One of the things that stuck out was the International Vaults Refining. Now, these bars, the International Vaults Refining bars, are very scarce. There are not very many of these out there, and these are kind of a prized bar by people who collect these type of vintage bars. Here's another example. This company is kind of interesting. They were launched by Gary Wayne and Georgie Anderson back in 1978 in Sacramento, California. And ostensibly, the idea was that they were going to purchase ore from mines, small mines in Alaska, refine it in California, and sell it for a profit. So they would be buying the ore at a discount, refining it, and selling the bars at a profit. And they tried to get a lot of investors to invest in this company, and they were successful. They picked up a lot of them. Now, we've talked before many times about this period of time when silver exploded in value. And I think it's kind of easy to think of that these people didn't know what they were doing, but I'm not sure that's really the case. They were probably sitting on a fair amount of silver, and when silver jumped up to $45, $50 an ounce, suddenly their silver had increased exponentially in value, and they were able to convince investors that this ride would continue and that they would continue to see these enormous profits. Honestly, I think that probably happened with a lot of these smaller silver manufacturers, these minters and these refiners back in the late 1970s, early 1980s. But when prices dropped, suddenly they had far less money on their books and probably far less money in their bank accounts than they had. And that's when things started to get really ugly. And eventually they were charged with 15 different counts of defrauding nearly 1,000 investors out of about $8 million. So they had to, the company went bankrupt in 1981. The fraud cases happened in 1982. But remember, this company started in 1978. So it was really getting off the ground in 1978 and then really running with it in 79 and 80 before they went bankrupt in 1981. This was a very short-lived company in the scheme of things. So their bars are sought after and unusual and are pretty scarce. And you can see they have this really neat vault image on it. And I think, as I've mentioned many times before, sometimes it's those characteristics that really make investor or collectors want these types of bars. I mentioned before with the Star Metals bar having a really neat icon on it, and then the Hoffman and Hoffman having a pretty nice icon on it as well. So when you've got these really neat iconography that shows up on these bars, I think it really lends something to them. I digress. As I was cataloging these pieces, there were a few smaller pieces by International Vaults Refining, and they were bars like this. This is a small 5-ounce version of the bar. Now, again, we call them a 5-ounce class because they poured them to a weight that was pretty close. Filled up their blank, or filled up their dye or whatever it was that they were using to pour these into a mold, and then they would let them cool and weigh them. And you don't usually find one that is exactly 10 ounces or exactly 5 ounces. Typically, they are a tiny little bit over or under. But this is the example of the 5-ounce bars that I had in the Lydian Hoard. And I was researching these, as I mentioned before, cataloging all the different attributes of them. And I went to the website allengelhard.com. Now, I talk about All Engelhard all the time. They aren't just a website that deals in Engelhard silver bars, one of my favorite vintage silver companies, probably one of yours too. But they also have definitive pages on many other refiners, especially these kind of earlier refineries from the 1960s, 70s, and even the 1980s. And one of the refiners that they talk about is International Vaults Refining. They actually talk about almost all of the bars that you see here. Again, this collector, when he was collecting these bars in the American West and Southwest in California in the 1970s and 80s, seemed to really focus on 5 or 6 manufacturers, and International Vaults was one of them. So, interesting to note, the International Vaults bar that I had, I noticed that my 5-ounce bar, class bars, had them minting on the side. And I just happened to notice when I was doing research on allengelhard.com, they have a few, they've listed 5-ounce bars as well. And their 5-ounce bars are all have this information that you see here, the vault symbol and the name of the company and the weight on the top of the bar. So I researched again. I took some really clear pictures. I really focused on whether or not this was something unusual and interesting, and I believe that it probably was. So I reached out to All Engelhard to ask them. Now, I've got a nice relationship with the guys at allengelhard.com. I've spoken with them on several different occasions. I've spoken with them about the proof-like Engelhard prospectors that I have. I've also worked with them on the Makata and Goldschmidt hallmarked early Engelhard bar by Sheffield Minting, asking them dates and if they knew anything about it. And I reached out to them and I asked them, do I have something different here? Is this something unusual? Is this possibly something unknown? And I sent them really good images, and we talked about it a little bit back and forth, and they came to the conclusion that yes, this is a different type. Now, I'm going to put an image of the 5-ounce bars that they have listed on their website so you can make the comparison for yourself. There is some controversy, there is some debate. What constitute a different type, a different size, a different shape? Is it a different font that's used? Is it a different picture? I think you can make the argument that any of those could be conceivably a different type. But when you have something as obvious as the logo and the information minted on the side of the bar rather than the top of the bar, I think you've got something very unusual. And they took a couple of months to really examine it before they came to the same conclusion that this is a different type, a previously unknown type of an International Vaults Refining 5-ounce bar. That's pretty exciting. I would call that a discovery. And in my almost 50 years now of being a numismatist, I haven't never discovered something else before. Although, like I said before, with the Mondanero piece, I was able to offer images so Numista could have a new plate coin, and I kind of felt like that was kind of similar. I'm really excited about these 5-ounce International Vaults Refining bars. Allengelhard.com has to work off of their knowledge and their research, and it's very difficult to estimate the mintages of these silver bars. And you have to ask yourself, even in those instances where they have relatively good records of some of these companies and the mintage, the number of bars that were made for each type, how many of those were melted, how many were destroyed, how many were lost. This is an issue that we face all the time in numismatics. We have pretty good records about how many pieces were minted. What we don't know is what the surviving numbers are. And again, if these bars were made in the mid-1970s, they are approaching 50 years being out there. These 5-ounce bars are quite small. They probably didn't make very many of them in the first place, but until now, we didn't even know that they had bars that were minted with the information on the side and the weight listed on the top. And I'm very fortunate that I also have one other subtype that I haven't really discussed with allenglehart.com yet, and it's possible that they will eventually list that as a subtype as well. But for right now, I'm very, very pleased to announce that allenglehart.com believes that this is in fact a different type bar, and that there are as few as 10 of them out there. And I'm very pleased to say that the Lydian Hoard had more than these 3 that you see here. We had, honestly, the majority of those 10. Now, again, we don't know for certain how many of these were made. This company was clearly struggling through some very unusual situations during this period of time. Did they make 10? Did they make 30? Did they make 50? Did they make 100? We just don't know. And with this video being released and with allenglehart.com updating their website to show this as a new type, it's very possible and even likely that more of these bars will emerge. Maybe other people watching this video will go check their bar and find out that they too have the type of bar that is minted with the information on the side rather than being on the top of the bar. That's one of the beauties of research when it comes to things like population reports, numismatics, and even precious metals. It's a continuing scholarly journey, and that's one of the beautiful things about this hobby, or whatever you want to call it. So there you go. Very pleased to announce that All Englehart agreed that this was a new type. I'm very pleased that I've got several examples of this in my stack and that are part of the permanent Lydian Hoard collection. And I will continue to do more and more research on these pieces as time permits. Hopefully I'll continue to discover information that will be useful to other stackers and other collectors of these types of vintage bullion pieces. Thank you for being with me on this journey. Thank you for being with me on my journey as I go deeper into the world of physical precious metals.